Good evening, everyone. My name is Radha Natarajan. I am the Executive Director of the New England Innocence Project, and I am honored to be opening this evening and this conversation. It is incredibly meaningful to see so many people here who have watched Trial 4 or who know Sean's story and who are hungry to hear more, to learn more, and to do more. We know that one story can spark collective action. We know it can energize and mobilize people to demand better, and it is important that it does. Sean's story is uniquely his, but what he suffered is unfortunately not unique. Systemic racism, police corruption, and sentences of death by incarceration. These are not features of Sean's story or even wrongful convictions alone. They are characteristic of a system whose origins are in slavery, and it is important that we speak honestly about that history, that context, and those intentions. And that's the discussion we hope to start tonight. A discussion about the truths and myths of the criminal legal system, about the role race plays in that system, and importantly, the things that we hope to see changed and how you can participate in that. It's an ambitious agenda, and we're not going to cover everything that we'd want, but we see this as a beginning. We're going to need you to continue this conversation with us in the future. So for now, let's bring together the powerful voices we have gathered here tonight. I'm going to ask each person to introduce themselves and tell you why they wanted to participate in this panel tonight about systemic injustice. And of course, I will start with Sean.
Good evening, everybody. My name, as you know, is Sean k.Ellis. I am the subject of the Trial 4 docuseries on Netflix, which offers a snapshot glimpse into the horrors and the redemption of my life and what I've experienced for over the last 28 years plus. And so I'm happy to be here, and thank you for all of your support. You know, I definitely want you all to know that whether it's in my DMs or whether you're calling, I definitely hear you, and we definitely are connecting. So, you know, thank you.
Thank you, Sean. And now to Rosmary.
Hi, everybody. I'm Rosmary Scaphiccio. I'm a criminal defense attorney here in Boston. I was one of Sean's lawyers in the saga to try to get him free. And I'm here tonight because I want to continue the conversation about the systemic racism within the criminal justice system. And more importantly, I want to start discussing solutions, how everyone can get involved and how we can effectuate change.
Thank you. And Devin McCourty.
Hey, everybody. Devin McCourty, 11-year NFL player for the New England Patriots. And I'm here because I want to be a part of the change. Very fortunate to play my 11 years with the Patriots and really have become a part of the community. I'm a part of the Massachusetts community. It's a second home for me. And I'm all about speaking out for the voiceless. And it's been a fun journey to be alongside some great men. As you see my brother on the call and other great men, I'm a part of the New England Patriots organization. And we're here tonight to just voice what we've learned and how, as NFL players, we can have an impact and show other people how they can impact as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Jason.
Yes, like Dev said, my twin brother, we played alongside each other for the last 3 years with the Patriots. Prior to that, I was in Tennessee and Cleveland, and I'm excited to be a part of this panel group because we have an opportunity, because what we do for a living, to lift a platform and talk about issues that are much more important than the game of football. And got a chance to watch Trial 4 and hear about other stories like Sean, and I think it's something that goes on in our country, and it's something that we have an opportunity to have an impact on. So I'm very excited to be amongst these very smart individuals who know a lot more about the criminal justice system and about the things that go on than Devin and myself. And it's been important for us to educate ourselves and try to listen as much as possible to people who know a lot more. So just excited to see where this conversation is going to head tonight.
Thanks, Jason. And District Attorney Rollins.
Thank you, Radha, and thank you for letting me be involved. I'm Rachel. I am Black Irish, episode 7 in trial 4. And I am the person that defied all the odds in Boston, in Suffolk County, and against the will of the mayor and all of the Boston police unions and all of the Irish elite electeds, won in the primary and then won in my general election. I am the first woman in the history of Suffolk County to ever be elected DA, and I'm a Black woman. And have been my whole life. So this is not something I came into, and I speak very clearly about how hard it is to change a system that I was an outsider fighting to get in, and now I am part of that system. So I am part of law enforcement, and every day I work as hard as I can to talk about the things that we're going to talk about today and to change a system that is working exactly the way it was set up to work.
Thank you. And thank you to everyone for having this incredibly important conversation. Now, we know that injustice flourishes in the darkness. And so we want to start today by shedding some light on the criminal legal system. And again, I want to start with Sean. Sean, from my work at the New England Innocence Project, I know that wrongfully convicted people have profound insight into the failures of the criminal legal system. From your experience being wrongfully convicted, what do you want people to know about the system that convicted you?
Yeah, the system that convicted me and the system that continues to convict Black and brown people, not just here in Suffolk County, not just here in Massachusetts, but throughout, the whole country, doesn't work. And I can say that from my own experience, having been the victim and survivor of the systemic failures that exist, and some of it is codified in policy, and so some of it is in law, but it's a racist system that has its roots in slavery, in terms of the creation of law enforcement being as slave catchers, and all the way up to the present day. And the only thing that has really changed is the manner in which Black and brown people are policed, and not necessarily what we have continued to face since we've been in this country.
Thank you, Sean. I want to turn now to Rosmary and Rachel. There are so many myths about the criminal legal system in the United States, from ideas about justice being blind to it being infallible. And from your experience working within the criminal legal system, what do you want people to know about how it works and how it doesn't work? I'm going to start first with Rosmary.
Thank you. What I want people to know is that right now the system is broken. And it's broken because of the systemic racism that exists within the system. It's difficult to get a jury of your peers. It's difficult to get the exculpatory evidence that you need to prove your client innocent. It's difficult to get mainly white police forces to understand that not all Black and brown people commit crimes. It's very difficult because I think when you're talking about jury impanelment, there's systems in places right now where certain DA's offices are running criminal records of jurors. And that systematically excludes a number of Black and brown jurors. And we're working really hard to make sure that doesn't happen anymore. There's also movement within the district attorney's office, and not necessarily Rachel, but within the district attorney's office, where they're trying to exclude all people under 30 to serve on jury duty. And people under 30 make up the biggest population of the city of Boston right now. And if we exclude people under 30 from jury service, then there's no way that any defendant can get a fair cross-section of the community. And if the system is going to work at all, we have to let it work the way it was intended. And so when we intentionally and systematically strike people from the jury, then it can't work the way that it intended to work. And I think that's one of the biggest problems. So instead of focusing on how we get these wrongfully convicted people out, I want to try to start focusing on how do they get wrongfully convicted in the first place. And I think it all starts with the jury. I think it starts with not being able, as a criminal defense attorney, and I've been doing this 30 years, not being able to impanel a fair cross-section of the community. Because right now in Massachusetts, age is not a protected class. And so district attorneys can excuse every single juror that's under 30 if that's what they choose to do. And there's not a lot we can do about it. We've been fighting against it. We think it's wrong. We think that the young people of America are changing the world. And so why can't they help us change the criminal justice system?
Thanks, Rosemary. What about you, Rachel?
Yeah, so, I come to this work as a daughter of a corrections officer and a niece of a state trooper for 30 years and have a respect for law enforcement, but also the sibling of several siblings that have cycled in and out of the criminal legal system. So we have communities that are over-policed and over-prosecuted, right? We have a police force that very often does not reflect the community that it's duty bound to protect and serve. They don't speak our languages. They haven't lived in our communities for a long time. And they might, as a result of veterans' preference, and I do believe veterans deserve a preference, maybe not every year, but certainly a preference, that they don't have to live in the communities that they police. So these police officers use their discretion every single day when they decide whether or not they give you a speeding ticket or whether or not they FIO you or whether or not they are, in your communities all the time. So prosecutors then over-prosecute poor people and Black and brown people. And we've seen that with Harvard studies commissioned by the late and great Chief Justice Gantz in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. We also have a system, and Rosemary knows this, where we have over 80 Superior Court judges in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. 3 of them are Black. 3. Okay. And so Rosemary, all of the defendants that you have with your extraordinary practice of, violent criminal offenses that are charged, your defendants, are they, 97% white? No, likely not, right? So we aren't represented. We are overrepresented in a system when it comes to harm and significantly underrepresented in the people who make decisions about what it is that's going to happen in that system. And to Rosemary's point, the hypocrisy that I see every single day in this system, to Rosemary's point, if people, my office included, are striking jurors that are under 30 years old and saying, oh, they can't make a decision and, they can't decide, they don't even know which major they want yet, but won't bat an eye when a 15-year-old is charged as a youthful offender, or are fighting me tooth and nail when I say let's raise the age from 18 to maybe 19 or 20, or maybe even 21, and look at brain science, which is what we are currently looking at. And of course, yet another one of Miss Fabulous Rosemary's cases. She has one of the seminal cases potentially before our Supreme Court. So there is tons of hypocrisy in this system. What is different about me is I'm speaking about it from this seat as the district attorney. They're used to seeing the Rosemarys of the world and the Radha Natarajans of the world saying these things. And they like to say, oh, well, of course you're going to say that. You work at the New England Innocence Project. Or Rosemary, of course you're going to say that. You defend these people, quote unquote. Well, these people are my people too, right? And now as the chief law enforcement officer, I'm comfortable saying it as well.
Thank you. So to Devin and Jason, you already mentioned this a little bit, but for at least the last year, you've been really trying to educate yourselves. You've been working to bring awareness to the criminal legal system. You've been visiting courts. Why have you chosen to use your influence to bring attention to the criminal legal system? Can you talk to us about the things that surprised you, things that when you went into looking at this and educating yourself, you didn't know.
I guess I'll go first. I think for us, we back in 2017, we set up a listen and learn through the Players Coalition, which is based on two players, Anquan Bolden and Malcolm Jenkins, created the Players Coalition, where it's run by players. And through that, we set up these listen and learn tours in whatever city you play in or you want to learn more about. And I think there were things that came up that just struck you and kind of startled you. Hearing the net worth of a Black family in Massachusetts and Boston was $8. At that time, walking in and hearing a 7-year-old could be brought into court and have charges brought upon them. And for me, it stuck out because when you're trying to get involved, I invited multiple teammates. But one of the key people I invited was Jonathan Kraft, the president of the New England Patriots. And when he heard that, when he heard 7 years old, he said, "What?" And right away he called people, and he wasn't aware of it. And I think that's what stuck out for a lot of us as players. We weren't aware of so many different things. We watch a ton of TV, we read articles, but learning things firsthand really made us want to jump in and be involved. Hold on.
Oh no, this is the best part of it. And there's a Band-Aid on the head, so that's it. Hi, beautiful girl. Best part of my night, hands down. Go ahead.
And I think that's what encouraged us to do more. We felt as players, we always jump in for all of the feel-good stuff. Call it, raising money and awareness for cancer. Me and my brother do sickle cell, feeding different people. Like, we always jump in for the feel-good stuff. But I think this has been very fulfilling to jump in and help people out that people throughout society say throw them away. And this has been very encouraging. And just to see some of the changes that have gone on around us lets us know that it is impactful. We hosted a DA forum with DA Rollins, and I've been impressed every time I've been in a room with her and hear her speak. And I think the changes you see shows as players and as people in society, we just have to keep pushing it.
Yeah, to what he said, and I think every virtual call or thing I've done with Dev, his kids always pop on, and I always text his wife and say, "Come get your kids." But to Dev's point, I think you saw in the NFL, starting kind of with Colin Kaepernick in 2016, players starting to really realize the power and the platform that we have to not only, like Dev said, talk about the different things that we're passionate about that everybody agrees with, but to actually be able to step up and talk about the things that kind of get swept under the rug or that make people uncomfortable. And I think it was important to Dev and myself and a lot of our teammates to not only get in front of a camera and talk about taking a knee or talk about something this or talk about that, but to actually go and educate yourself. Like Dev said, hosting a forum, going sitting in court, actually seeing what the process is, trying to hear it and learn for yourself to be able to educate, to be able to talk about it intelligently and be able to expand on what you've seen. And I think for us, it's been crazy just to not only learn about the criminal justice system, but to see how it starts so young, to go to some of the Black and brown communities and see what the education is like for them, how limited it is, and how there's a lack of resources, to see the school to prison pipeline and to learn how it's all being built and how it was kind of built to run exactly the way it's running. It encouraged us and inspired us to try to do our part to be able to lift it up and give a platform to the k.Ellises of the world to be able to tell his story so that people all across the world can turn on Netflix and learn about it and to see that. And I think that was one of the key things in watching it, to see how much he emphasized that it's not about him and it's about everybody that's going through similar circumstances. So I think it's just been inspiring of us just to hear the stories of Sean's and different people across the New England area and to be able to try to lend a hand and help.
We're so grateful for all of the help and all of you for talking about the myths and sort of what's surprising you. For me, one of the biggest myths that I have seen, both as a public defender and in my work at the New England Innocence Project, is that prisons keep us safe. That's one of the biggest myths, and that caging more people and creating harsher and harsher punishments will somehow create less harm. And this idea is embedded in American consciousness and our culture. It is the default that people go to, so much so that when we watch TV, we learn of a crime, we hear someone is arrested, and we somehow feel safer. And I say that it's a myth because increasing punishment or policing has never been shown to reduce crime rates. It does nothing to improve the material conditions that led to the harm in the first place. And as Sean, as so many exonerees know, prison takes away everything from a person, their family, their community, and it leads to generational trauma. And so it's important that as we discuss various aspects of how the criminal legal system is functioning or not functioning, that we also talk about these ideas that fuel it, and whether they're real or whether they're just things that we have come to believe. So, we talk about, and we have to talk about, what is accountability without prisons? What could that look like? What about something that provides restoration for people who have been harmed and doesn't just discard or disappear those who we believe caused harm? And on that, I wanted to show all of you some data about, see if I can.
I'm not muted.
I don't know if it's going to work.
It will.
Okay, here we go. Here we go. All right. So I want to show all of you this data because I think it's really important to understand that when we look at the United States and even Massachusetts as compared to so many countries, and in this it's the founding NATO countries, what we see is our over-reliance on incarceration. And we also see that it is a very American thing. It doesn't have to be that way, right? And the next thing that we see that goes along with that is that, and frankly, we could just do all night slides on racial disparities in every aspect of the criminal legal system. This is just in imprisonment, okay? And as Devin and Jason talked about, sort of how early it starts, like, so this chart is, starting at 18, but it goes through the different age groups, and we could go much younger than that. And you would see this disparity where per population, the orange represents Black men and the yellow white men. And it's extremely stark. We can't talk about the criminal legal system without talking about race. And so that's what we're going to talk about now. I want to, again, turn to Sean because I want him to lead us with his experience. Sean, can you talk about the role that race played in your wrongful conviction and what you've seen? You've done so much work in the wrongful conviction community, how you've seen it play out in our community as well.
Yeah, so race in my case. What I could say about that is that it was a white police officer, a white Irish police officer at that, and I was a young Black male from the inner city, and at that time, the way that Black men, and still to this day, the way that Black men are portrayed just throughout society is as the big boogeyman. Is someone who's criminalized and that you have to be afraid of. So when you look at the criminalization of black and brown people throughout society, it's nothing to take one as what happened with myself and pluck me out of my community, because when you look at the Boston Police Department at that time, it was majority top heavy white men. And so it was nothing to levy not just the force and power that comes with one's badge, but the privilege that comes with one being white to be able to go into the community, kind of like as was done with like Emmett Till, and then you grab me out of my community and then you sentence me to die in prison for the remainder of my natural life, as though that doesn't have a human toll. But it isn't just about what happened in my case, because what happened in my case was, like I said, allowed to happen as a result of society. And so when we as a society have law that's practiced based on race, you get the Freddie Grays and Eric Garner's and George Floyd's, like you get that kind of behavior that's levied by those who have power to levy it, because it's what's been going on throughout history. So, you know, race doesn't just play a role in my case, but plays a role in the execution of the day-to-day workings of the criminal law system.
Yeah. Thank you. I want to go back to Rachel first. You had said before that, you know, it's working the way it's intended, and I heard the McCourty brothers talk a little bit about that. I heard Rosmary talk about it being broken. I want to focus on that point for a minute. Why did you say, Rachel, that it's working the way it's intended? Can you talk about that?
Because it was set up for us, but not by us, right? As Sean pointed out, police were essentially, you know, there were slave brigades. There were individuals looking for fugitive slaves, right? That ultimately turned into police departments. There is an entire system with our nation, right, where we weren't considered even full human beings up until a certain point of time, right? So the fact that an overwhelmingly white police force, an overwhelmingly white prosecutor's office, and, you know, I will also say an overwhelmingly white criminal defense bar, they are fighting the good fight, but this is not, you know, we all have to work on the diversity that we have in our leadership and who we have representing or making these decisions. We're making these decisions. If we look at some of the death penalty cases that happened in the minutes up until our former occupant of the White House left, it was not just bad prosecution that resulted in those, you know, horrific circumstances. It was bad defense attorneys, right, who didn't care about their clients. We have an entire system and failed them, right? And the prosecutors failed as well. But of the last 5, there were several where it was criminal defense lawyers that did horrifically awful things and nothing, making a murderer. If you've watched that at all, it's like that man's criminal defense attorney needs to be brought up on charges himself, right? So I look at that and just say, the system is set up for poor people and Black and brown people to fail. It is fines and fees are basically paying for a system on the backs of poor people. And we have to understand that. I agree sometimes when people say, oh, it's broken, but I firmly believe that it's working just the way it was set up to. And we just need different actors in these roles to say, we're not doing that anymore, right? And to have unfettered access, which, you know, I've seen some of the comments, you know, there are people that might say like, you know, you didn't allow my brother out, you didn't do this in this case. You know, we're going to always try to look at each case and make decisions based on what the facts show us. But I am always willing to hear from the criminal defense bar and others as to what we're doing wrong. And I think that is a 180 turn compared to some of my predecessors who never would be getting, you know, texted or called by a Rose Scaphiccio, right? Or the New England Innocence Project to say, we're going to try to do this. And maybe we don't agree all the time, but at the very least, I am willing to listen, which I think is a very different take than many of my predecessors, my male predecessors have had prior to me.
Radha, can I just jump in here for 1 second?
Please, yes.
Let's stand up for the criminal defense attorneys a little bit. And I don't disagree with a lot of what you said, Rachel, but here's a statistic that's pretty telling. And here's one of the major problems that I would like to start discussing. And that is that police misconduct occurred in more than half of all the wrongful murder conviction cases involving innocent Black people. Half. And the problem is there's no accountability. And so when someone like Sean spends 22 years in jail for a crime he didn't commit, and the district attorney's office dismisses the case but says, we still think he's guilty, we just can't prove it. What that does is it absolves them of having to take responsibility for what happened. So now the police department doesn't have to take any responsibility for their racist conduct in this case. It was easier for them to believe that a young inner city Black kid did this than any of the 200 people that were on the tip lines saying that other people had killed Detective Mulligan. It was easier to believe that a young poor Black man did it. And so what have we done with these officers who literally railroaded a young 19-year-old Black man and caused him to spend 22 years in jail? I'll tell you, nothing. We've done not one thing. Every single one of those officers retired. The ones that weren't criminally prosecuted still have their pensions. The people that were on the Netflix documentary who said things like, this was a perfect investigation, I supervised this investigation, there's nothing wrong with this investigation. When they say things like that, they get to deny accountability. They don't have to be held responsible. And then what happens is that there's no investigation. So as we sit here today, I absolutely believe that the cases that were investigated by the people that were involved in Sean's case should be looked at in a systematic way, because we know these cops were dirty. We know that they were putting people in jail for crimes they didn't commit. And if we don't hold them accountable for hiding evidence that could have freed Sean 22 years ago, then what are we doing? We're spinning our wheels. And the problem with what they did in Sean's case is when they don't take responsibility, they don't have to take action. And that's what's wrong with this case and many, many other cases.
And let me just reply. So you saw in episodes 7 and 8, I wasn't the DA when this happened. You
Absolutely.
saw that the office I inherited rushed to, and I have openly said, I think that the way that this was handled was poor sportsmanship. It never would have been handled that way for me, right? With respect to how that office, that the individual who sat there speaking, who had been the DA for less than 3 months, didn't earn a single vote to become district attorney after Dan Conley left when his heir apparent didn't win the primary. I get it, Rosmary. I'm with you. What I've done since coming in is indicted a state trooper who we believe lied. What I've done since coming in is 240 years of people serving sentences that were wrongfully convicted. I've stood up and been lambasted by the Globe, the Herald, every conservative person out there, racist zealots, and the two people that could be from Central Casting that make Archie Bunker look like, Martin Luther King. Yeah, those two people that Netflix put up there, they're going to be the ones that are coming after me. I'm fighting this every single day and still getting, and this is what's tough when you do it. I get it. I asked for this role, but there are very few people when racist police unions are saying he's incompetent. We're all so busy doing other things. It's hard to stand up and say, no, I'm going to do this. But I have 240 years since I've been here for almost 2 years of people that are now home as a result of that. And all I can say is there is more to come.
Thank you to both of you. I want to broaden it out just a little bit to bring both Jason and Devin into this to talk about, how do you see the system? Do you see it that it's working the way it intended? Do you see it that it's broken, it can be fixed? How do you view it?
You're muted, Jay. Sorry about that. Without a doubt, I think it's working the way it's supposed to. And I've gotten a chance to learn. When I was in Nashville playing for the Titans, I went on a ride along with a police officer, and I got a chance to talk to an officer there. And he just talked about their process of becoming a police officer. And he talked about going through the academy of, say, I think he had an example of an officer that he worked with who grew up in a mostly white area and really didn't have any people around him that were different from what he looked like. And he said, so he really didn't have any biases that he could think of, conscious biases against anybody of a different race. But then he said, but then you look at what surrounds him. So you turn on the TV and there's a way that typically a black man is portrayed on the television. He said, then you fast forward this kid through his life and he may go to a college where he's still not surrounded by people that are different from him. He said, then he joins the academy. And he said the academy puts up videos of real life stories. And he said a lot of those stories are of people of color. And he said all throughout these years, you're just developing a bias against a certain group of people and you don't even realize it. And now next thing you know, this guy graduates from the academy and he's placed in an area where it's mostly black and brown people. And before you know it, you're pulling somebody over at night and you're scared to death as a police officer because you haven't had many encounters with someone that looks different from you. And for me, it's just been about learning and hearing the experience of a guy like Sean and different experiences that go on in our country. And when you hear things like that, and for me growing up, you always knew that it was different. I remember growing up in my neighborhood and a cop came around and I can't remember what happened, but was asking different people if anyone had saw anything. And one of the older kids that were around me was just like, hey, when the cops come around, don't say anything to them. And that's built in by us as kids, that we learn that cops aren't our friend and that they're here to do something bad to us. And obviously, as you grow up, you realize, yeah, of course, all cops aren't bad. There are some good cops. And I think like what you guys are both saying, when you talk about accountability, how do you get that to where you get the good cops that are rising to the top and you get the bad cops filtered out of it because they're not allowing it? And I think that's what we've been missing, because yes, there are black people that do bad things, but there are a ton of black people that don't. There are cops that are really good cops, but there are a ton of cops that aren't. And how do we filter this thing out without just generalizing everybody of this or that? And I think that's been the learning experience for me of trying to figure out how I can help to continue to move that forward. And I see there's so many people on this call today that are trying to do the same.
Yeah, and I agree. And I would say to jump in and have an opinion about this system has been easy because what we do for a living, like we're no different in what we do every day. We play a sport that is dominated by black and brown people. 70 to 80% of those people that play in the games are black and brown. Head coaches, it's less than 5 head coaches, less than 5 general managers, no owners of color. So, you know, when we talk about this system, it works the way America works. You know, we can pick any top organization, anything you choose, schooling, that's the way it works. So I think it's very important for people with a voice to stand up and scream when DA Rollins does something that helps black and brown people. When lawyers like Rosmary jump out there and make a difference, like it's important for us to get out there and speak about those things so people don't only see the negative things out there. Go back. I'll be there. And I think that's the key to trying to get this the right way.
Radha, can I just add, you know, when we see leaders like the McCourtys, and when we look in, you know, back in our history with the Jesse Owenses, the Muhammad Alis, the Kareem Abdul-Jabbars, the Billie Jean Kings, the Megan Rapinoes, right? Sports has always been a place where people can use their platform, and we are really, really fortunate that we have these two people that, you know, I as a candidate, and I was just texting actually with one of the other candidates, Shannon McAuliffe, the excellent criminal defense attorney that was on that panel you guys put on, who has been in this work for a really long time, just how one person can change and shift what happens in a circumstance. So although Shannon didn't end up being the DA, her being a great criminal defense lawyer and having been, you know, in MACDIL or CPCS or being on the murder list or understanding all of those things, she shifted the entire way that our DA race went because she was raising the bar for many of the rest of us. And I just think with you guys, McCourtys, you know, I'm not saying you're Muhammad Ali, so just both of you knock it off, right? But I am saying the work you're doing here, testifying in front of our legislature. And what you didn't say was it used to be 7 years old, but as a result of you guys speaking to the legislature, the age was raised to 12, right? And yeah, there were a lot of other people that did it, but they pay attention when people like you walk in. So we appreciate all the work you're doing.
So all of you have mentioned part of what you wanted to do, why you wanted to do this is because you want to actually create change. I think that was one of the first things that Rosmary said. And people who have watched Trial 4 and who are here, the vast majority of people who are here have watched it. They've expressed being shocked, angry, frustrated, disillusioned, horrified, and really sad. And I want to talk about how people, regular people without platforms, how they can channel their energy into change. And, what power do people have individually, collectively to make a difference? And where should they start? So Rosmary, since this is sort of, the thing that you really wanted to do this for, I wanted to give you the chance to start and talk about just some of the ideas that you have to bring people into this.
Thank you, Radha. So one of the first things that people can do is register to vote, so that everybody understands that jury pools are pulled from registered voters. So to the extent that you can register to vote, that's what we need you to do. And then once you get a jury service notice, I know nobody wants to serve on jury duty, but we need people that reflect the actual communities on our juries. We need the juries to reflect a fair cross-section of the community. And in order to do that, A, you have to show up, and B, you have to be willing. And what I want to tell people is that just because you've had a bad experience with a police officer, that should not exclude you from jury duty forever. They're going to ask you a question that is, would you believe the testimony of a police officer over that of a civilian witness? And if your answer to that is yes, it doesn't mean automatically that you get excluded from jury service. If you tell the judge that, yes, you've had this bad experience, it's a part of who you are, you didn't ask for it, it just happened, but you can remain fair and impartial, then it's up to the lawyers to decide whether or not you get to stay. And so don't let that interaction, that life experience that you've had, prevent you from serving on jury duty. And then as to all of the young people out there, just make sure that when you show up for jury duty, when you're there, when you're in the courtroom, understand that you have a voice, and that your voice should be heard. And I know that especially college age kids, try to do your jury service in the summer, because it's going to be more than 1 or 2 days. They lie when they say it's 1 or 2 days. It's not true. But we need people of, a true cross section of the community on our juries routinely. And we're still pushing to make sure that people under 30 aren't routinely excluded. And so what can you do about that? You can't go to the courts these days because of COVID, but take to social media, comment on what you see. You have such power in the realm of social media to make change. You've proven it. We changed who the president was, and it was mostly the young people out there that did that. And so take charge, stand up, be counted, and have that voice. If you think it's wrong that jurors under 30 are being excluded from jury duty, and you happen to be a juror that's excluded, or you just think that it's wrong, then stand up and speak about it. Talk about it, because if we keep the conversation going, then maybe something happens. In addition, I think that there should be real civilian review boards for wrongful convictions. Right now, there's a wrongful conviction unit in every DA's office, but the district attorney's office gets complete control over who gets to be evaluated and who gets to be helped. And they don't have the subpoena power that a review board would have. If we had a review board that was a real cross section of the community, including some real, young people on this review board, and they had the power to subpoena records, somebody could apply to them and say, hey, here's the situation here. I was wrongfully convicted, and I've been trying to get these records for 12 years, like in Sean's case. Can you help me? Can you take a look at my case? If they had the power to subpoena records, to get records from the police departments and from different crime scene services, maybe people don't spend as long in jail as they would have if they actually had the access to the information. Because one of the other statistics that we should talk about is the fact that in cases where people are wrongfully convicted, very often it's a delay in access to information. And so when you are convicted and you are trying to get access to, in our case, it was, the tip line tips. 12 years it took us before we actually got access to them. It was internal affairs records of police officers, almost 14 years. They had this information and they had it in their police department and they never shared it. And the fact that they didn't share it with anyone for that long resulted in Sean spending all that time in jail. And so we need to hold them accountable. We need a board that has some teeth. And when I say teeth, I don't just want them investigating the fact that police may have done something wrong in the community. I think there should be a separate board devoted exclusively for wrongful convictions, a place where people can go that perhaps don't have any money, that don't have any help anywhere else, and get this board to actually look into the wrongful convictions in this case. And I think if we start, registering people to vote, if we start getting people to serve on jury duty, if we start, really just being social and vocal about what's happening in the jury system, maybe we prevent some of the wrongful convictions. And then on the other side, if we hold these police officers in law enforcement agencies accountable for not turning over the information that they're supposed to turn over by these civilian review boards, then we're making some progress towards good. Because right now, if we're just going to depend on internal affairs and anti-corruption to discipline people who have absolutely violated their trust of the public and violated their duty to turn over exculpatory evidence, we're just going to keep spinning our wheels. And again, we saw it in trial 4 when the police officers were testifying or speaking and saying this was a great investigation. There was nothing wrong with this investigation. And we spent literally 8 hours of talking about what's wrong with this investigation, but that's what's wrong. If you can completely deny that it exists, you don't have to take any accountability. So if we had a mechanism to make sure that they were being held accountable, not just by indicting Rachel, but by a real looking into these cases and saying, okay, everyone who was involved with Mulligan, Asara, Robinson, Brazel, we need to look at their cases. If they're still sitting in jail, look at their cases. Keeler, Detective Dan Keeler, the Mr. Homicide. And he was Mr. Homicide for a good 20 years until someone started asking, why is he closing so many cases? And it turned out he was lying. He was saying things that weren't true. He was getting people to say things that weren't true. And there are still hundreds of people sitting in jail today because of Detective Keeler's actions. And so what are we doing about that? And so I can tell you that Radha and I are trying to compile lists of all of his cases to see if we can find a pattern. But we don't have the power to subpoena the information that we need. And so we need a body that's going to be able to do that for us so that we can move this forward and effectuate change.
Thank you,
Radha.
Rosmary.
Can I jump in for a second? So word is what I'll say is like word, but with respect to registering to vote, very important, jury duty and grand jury, right? So like when I look at my grand juries in Suffolk County, which are 23 individuals, if we have a really good cross section of people inside of a grand jury, they're going to hold us to a higher level before they return an indictment called a true bill as opposed to a no bill. And when we talk about impaneling a jury, Rosmary, now that there is a Black woman running the DA's office in Suffolk County, I don't want to hear we had one Black juror and that was enough, right? Like our boards and commissions that we have, it's like, oh, we have diversity. There's a white woman on our board. It's like, okay, that was good 20 years ago. No, we need not just gender, but also race and LGBTQ and ability and all of these other things with respect to that. Regarding the Civilian Review Board, I think that is absolutely important and they have the power, but we've created the Integrity Review Bureau, right? Which is different. We don't only look at claims of actual innocence. We look at constitutionally flawed convictions. We look at ethical violations. We look at things where Arnie King, for example, is a man who spent 49 years behind bars. He admitted that he murdered John Labanara at the age of 18 while on drugs. But the person that was in my role back then had a policy where in cross-racial homicides, they struck all the Black jurors when the defendant was Black and the victim was white. And I will not stand behind that. So we agreed to reduce Arnie's first-degree murder to a manslaughter with time served. He had served 49 years and 20 is the cap for what you get for a manslaughter. So we are doing as much as we can, Rosmary. And yeah, we do need, Boston just agreed to have an OPAT, which is their Civilian Review Board that actually does have subpoena power. Let's see if we actually get it, staffed. right, and up and running. But I am looking into these things as well, very differently than my predecessors did, right? We are not rubber stamping. And this is the problem, Radha, is our system prefers finality over justice every day, right? And I have said out loud, I will no longer be legally right and morally wrong. I won't do it, right? We are going to stand up and make sure that we are making decisions that are morally accurate and correct. And to Rosemary's point, some of it is intentional bias, absolutely, but we have to look at the disparate impacts, right? If Rosemary is saying that we're running criminal records checks, and we think, oh no, but we do it for everyone and it's great. Well, what does the data show with respect to who actually gets removed after we've seated that jury and we ran the Corey background or the BOP? If it's 83% Black and brown, that's a disparate impact that we need to understand, right? So we are willing to hear these things, and I am listening closely with what we're hearing, not just from Sean and Rosemary, but from the McCourtys as well, and Radha.
Thank you. I want to hear from, first let's go to Devin before his daughter wants to come in too, and see, what do you think that the people who are here, who are not prosecutors or defense attorneys like Rosemary, I mean, who the hell is, and you know, what can people do? What do you want them to do today after hearing this?
Yeah, I think one of the things is don't sell yourself short. Don't say you don't have a platform. Jerry says it all the time. Everyone has a platform. And I think you're starting now by coming here, listening, educating yourself. We were fortunate. Look around you. We got to hook up with Rasan Hall from the ACLU. Go on people's websites, see what they write about, and then use your platform by going into work, talking to your coworkers about it. Jason and myself will be doing a virtual talk with one of my friends, his wife's job, bringing us in to talk about diversity. And I think through that, as people decide to go in their homes, we play in a sport where we have people from all across the country, the world. There's some people from deep down south in Mississippi and Georgia, and I have white teammates. They go into that home now and they speak to an uncle, a grandfather who doesn't see things the way they do because of life experiences. You've now created a new platform to tell that person, who now will tell another person. Next thing you know, they're watching K.Ellis's trial for on Netflix. Now they have a new understanding, and you don't know who they know and what connection they have to the legal system. So I would say, everyone, don't sell yourself short. Your legislators, there's people you can call at different times to express how you feel when you think something's done wrong. And then, like everyone else said, use your power to vote.
Thank you. Jason.
Yeah, I know we're running low on time, so I won't add too much to it. I think what he said is perfect. And sometimes, like he said, a lot of people look at us and say, oh, you have this amount of followers, you play in front of a large group of people. But like he said, you can change your family right around you. You can change somebody when you're walking in the street. There's a platform for each and every one of us. When you educate yourself and you believe in what you're saying and you're confident, it can go a long way. So I would say continue to challenge yourself. Find comfort in being uncomfortable, talking about things that may rub somebody the wrong way, but you feel strongly enough to get in that uncomfortable position and really try to impact someone.
Thank you. And Sean, I want to leave the rest of the space for you. You know, you've talked about how making Trial 4 was not about you, and it was about building a movement for change. So what do you hope that people will understand and do after watching Trial 4, after being here today? We want to hear from you.
So, you know, one of the things that wasn't manifest in Trial 4 is that at the time of the investigation into the homicide of the Detective Mulligan, there was also a dual investigation into some of the investigators, some of the key investigators that played a role in the production of every critical piece of evidence that was manufactured in my case. And so as the investigation was steered towards me, to be clear, there was also simultaneously a dual investigation into Detective Robinson, Detective Sarah, and John Brazel, who was also a detective, just a detective investigating the case. And that's going to continue to happen, not just in trial 4, because it happened, and to this day, you know, I'm still fighting. I'm still fighting for that exoneration, and so every day that justice is denied to somebody who is fighting an injustice, someone who's sitting in prison for a crime that they did not commit, there's a human harm being done. I lost my dad while I was incarcerated. There's people who are in prison for crimes that they did not commit, whose only connection to society and the world and their family is a mother or is a sibling that's high in age, that has more time behind them than they do in front of them. And that's their only hope. That's their only means to try to get, you know, people out here in society to hear a voice that's not being heard, which is why I truly appreciate the actions, the involvement of the McCourty brothers, because the connection between myself and them wasn't just made since the release of Trial 4. There was a connection that was made before Trial 4. So their commitment to criminal justice reform is there, and so, you know, to sum it all up, in that we are running short on time. It's be an ambassador, be an ambassador. Fund organizations like the New England Innocent Project that helps to fight wrongful convictions, and definitely support the idea of a conviction, a civilian review panel to look at wrongful convictions, because what my case exposed is that when you leave people within the system to govern the system, like, you know, you're putting a lot of faith, you're putting a lot of hope into the people who are running those systems, and there's not always going to be a progressive district attorney leading an office, whether it's Rachel Rollins, but whether it's the DA in Philadelphia. We have to move out now to ensure that the policies that are in place, the laws that are in place, are attacked to dismantle systemic and institutional racism. And I'll leave off at that.
Thank you, Sean. We actually only have a couple minutes left, and I want to give folks maybe just a quick couple words, but, you know, I just want to tell people, you know, connect with organizations that are working towards freedom, decarceration, who are campaigning against new prisons, who are supporting mutual aid, who have formerly incarcerated people as leaders, like Sean, who is guiding policy. That is so important, that you connect with organizations who support loved ones who are incarcerated. That's just very, very critical. So let me just let everybody say one word, and Sean always will have the last word. I'm going to start first with Jason, because he basically ran out of time last time.
Man, I just want to say I appreciate everybody on here. Man, Sean, I appreciate you for your resilience. We always talk about in football overcoming adversity and continue to persevere, and watching Trial 4, getting a chance to hear from you this year through the team. That's the definition of resilience and perseverance, to continue to fight, to continue to believe in yourself, and to continue just to put the effort forward every single day. I have no idea. I can't even fathom what those 22 years were like for you, but just appreciate what you're doing now of giving back. And we're all trying to do that. And you're leading the charge, and you inspire so many people. Just hearing you talk and getting a chance to watch Trial 4, you inspired us to be able to get involved and be able to do our part to help and do certain things that we can. So I just want to say thank you and appreciate you, and always praying for you.
Thank you for your support, brother.
I'll keep it brief. Exonerate Sean Ellis, straight like that.
Rachel.
I agree.
Well, we will say that on March 15th, there will be some announcements to be made. There's a pending motion. And Sean said be an ambassador, and that is right. But I want you to also be we are in the fight of our lives, guys, right? I need unindicted co-conspirators. I want you to be very active in what it is that you're demanding from us. And one of the things I'm proud of is, rather than yelling at people to hire returning citizens, I am hiring some of them now myself, so that when I look at leaders of industry in Massachusetts and the Amazons and the GEs or the city of Boston or the state are saying, oh, we can't. As the chief law enforcement officer in Suffolk County, if I can, you can, right? So we need to continue these conversations. Sean, the grace and dignity and decency you display every day, you are a better person than I am. And I just, I'm sorry that the system failed you. And I have made that very clear that I believe firmly that it did. And we will see what happens, March 15th. But thank you for letting me speak on this.
Rosemary.
Thank you. So what I just want to thank everybody for being here and all of the people who participated tonight. Thank you to the McCourty brothers for being able to participate and for being a voice. You guys probably have the biggest voice of everybody here because you have huge followings that, you're athletes and it's just, it's so humbling to hear that, you're involved in these things and that you care about the criminal justice system and that you can make a difference. One tweet from you is going to go way further than anything that we can do. And so I'm just so grateful that you participated. I loved hearing the experiences that you guys had, the roles that you've played within the criminal justice system, the ideas that you brought to the table. I really appreciate it. Rachel, I appreciate you being here and being able to continue our discussions. But more than anything, Sean, I appreciate you. I appreciate you for sharing your story. It's just such, the reason that we got involved in Trial 4 was to share your story, to inspire others to change. And I think you've done a fabulous job of sharing your story and inspiring others to change. We have heard from people all over the world after having watched Trial 4. Not just in the United States, but all over the world, just amazed at Sean's resilience, amazed at how powerful he is when he speaks, and amazed at the idea that he can be a product of change, that he's not bitter and got out of jail and fell in a gutter somewhere. He is holding his head high every day. He's working every day. He's trying to effectuate change. He's out there doing toy drives and for Christmas. He's volunteering at the New England Innocence Project. He delivers meals to the homeless. He's just he is the epitome of a second chance, and everyone in my mind deserves a second chance.
Sean.
Yes. Yeah. So, I would just say thank you to everybody for your support. I want to lift the names of Ricky McGee, who is my brother, who helped me.
Fuquan.
Yes, Fuquan, who helped me and helped to keep me strong and helped to inspire me to fight the injustice that I was facing. I want to lift the name of Steve Pina up, who I met on a day of my arraignment in West Roxbury Court, and we spent the 22 years in prison that I was together. And both of those gentlemen, along with a Kenneth Nixon from Detroit, who are fighting, who's fighting the same fight that I had to fight. And so, there's a problem, and I just ask you, to connect with me, and let's continue to move out so we can effectuate change, be it through legislation, be it through policy. There's power in numbers, and we have a voice, and I'm willing to use my voice. Let's connect, and peace.
Thank you everyone, and good night to everyone who joined us. We're so grateful.
Thank you, Radha, for putting this together. Great. We really appreciate it.
Very good job. We appreciate you.
Yes, thank you. Awesome.
Thank you all.